She's already up in here preaching. What did you just say again?
We are really close to the camera.
Oh,
It's odd.
well, welcome to church.
Welcome.
If we're not in your face, then we're in your sound.
What did I just say?
You said, listen to feel. There's something like that, right?
Listening to feeling.
Oh. Preach.
Here's what happens is we're talking a lot about connection lately, and we're talking a lot about feeling versus thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, the common war.
Yeah. Here comes every animal we own because we've turned on the camera.
Right.
And there's a button
And
on the camera that puts out a very high-pitched signal that only the dogs know.
and rabbit.
And the rabbit, and they all say, they're recording. And then they all come in. But what happens is we don't know the difference a lot of times in feeling and thinking. And do we think what we feel, or do we feel what we think?
Right. No, that's beautiful.
Does that make sense?
Okay, it's the only sense there is.
If I think I'm depressed, I'm going to feel depressed.
You labeled the feeling.
If I'm going to feel sad, or if I'm going to think I'm sad, I'm going to feel sad.
Okay. Or is the feeling arise, the thought it puts the sadness or whatever the labeling effect of the feeling is, now you have a role to play in it. And that role is usually nowhere near being you.
That's exactly it. Especially now, they tell me that my body has cancer, that my body has cirrhosis, that my body has diabetes, that my body is failing, that my body is dying, is what they're telling me. Right?
Well,
But I'm not hearing that because I'm not feeling that. I feel sick sometimes, but I feel very well sometimes too. Human beings want me to feel sick all the time.
oh, there's money in it.
And I don't feel sick all the time.
Yeah.
I feel sick some of the time. But do I think I feel sick, or do I feel sick? Do you think you feel lonely? Or are you lonely? Do you think you feel sad? Or are you sad? How do you listen to feeling? How do you do that?
Well, if there was a way, I'm sure you're going to find a way to do this. Sound. Sound is a very important experience when it comes to your senses. Sound is something that, experiencing it outside of you, you feel something inside of you. Sound inside of you detracts the law of paying attention to what you feel, because we choose thinking over what we feel before we choose feeling over what we think. So what this often does on a conscious level is it actually is your form of disconnect. The moment you can go inside your mind, you're not really listening. You're now experiencing thoughts, thought forms, thoughts that really never have a space to tell you anything about what you feel. One of the most beautiful practices that we do is being able to feel one another before we think of one another. Because if you notice in connection with those you're connected to, you feel them first, and you choose to go into your head whether or not you're going to disconnect, or if you're going to tell yourself that their love for you isn't real, or if you're telling yourself that this is all an illusion, all of that is sound, and what you feel doesn't match the sound. And the way that you're interpreting this, the way that you experience this, has nothing to do with what you see, nothing to do with what you hear, everything to do with what you feel. If you're listening to this and your eyes are closed, pay attention to everything in the body and what the body is experiencing. Not everything needs to be a dialogue the mind needs it out to be. When we came into connection, one of the biggest obstacles we had to overcome is what we think over what we feel. And since you've spent the majority of your life being in thought, you never really returned back to what you feel. And there's so many different things that can happen to you in this lifetime that will actually detour that. This is the way back. This is the experience back. If you're not feeling yourself, if you're not feeling first, you're going to go into the mind and do a whole bunch of reasons why you're not doing that. But none of the reasons really ever equate to the feeling. Because when you come into connection, you have a feeling that's there, a very present feeling. Then you start thinking against the feeling rather than for it. And it's a mistake on the mind's part, because the mind will never ever really come up with a thought that will connect you to another person or yourself. Everything to the mind and time is the illusion of what is felt. It's like a narration of what you feel, but not necessarily a narration of what you feel. And you don't even understand that in connection, if you're not in what you feel, then what you think is what's going to show up. It's almost like you permanently sabotage yourself and someone or your opportunity to feel love versus think love. Think love is not real. This is where a lot of false in you shows up. A lot of false gets drawn to you because of what you think, but none of it really pays the price for what you feel. And that the cost of that is a lot. Probably more than what it should be. Feeling your presence, feeling your ability to feel, and knowing that feeling always came first. This is something that we all forgot. We all don't focus on because it's never developed. And I think even as we look at the state of the world, state of connection, state of everything around us, everything is kind of starting to revert more to what you feel versus what you think. The issue is that we still want to label the feeling. We want to label the experience of the feeling. We want to remember. There's never nothing to remember. A dog is beautiful in this form. Having no memory seems to produce unconditional love. Not remembering produces unconditional love. Because a dog feels everything, why haven't we figured that out? And we're talking about connection. Everything you feel is not what you think, any more than what you think isn't everything you feel. You got to draw the line. You have to make a choice. You have to feel everything as though you chose it. And I get it. Well, what about the hurt? What about the pain? What about the... Let me think about this doesn't really get you to feel anything. I need some time to process. It's not I need some time to feel this. And if you ever notice, you don't need time to feel. Feeling is now. If you're not feeling you, who are you expecting to connect through feeling for you? It's been feeling that has created healing, not the thoughts about it. If you can't sit with what you feel, you will not allow anybody else to do it with you either. As a matter of fact, you will find ways to prevent them from feeling you because you're too busy in your head making sure that they're in their head not feeling you too. There's not any dots to connect you. There's only the feeling to connect to. In the space of feeling, if you're not feeling connected to, then your thoughts about it have done something to the feeling, not the other way around. If you want to be felt, then feel you first. If you want feeling to show up in your life, feel everything as though everything is all you can feel. Your thoughts won't teach you this. There's nobody coming to school. You've never went to emotion class. You never went to behavioral explanation class of what somebody thinks and what they feel about you. None of these things ever have risen in a way that actually tells you anything about yourself. You need to feel who you are to know who you're not. And the mind is going to make sure that it finds ways to keep this as though you need to think about it. But what if we told you that control isn't found in feeling, it's found in the mind, and the mind wants to control how you feel? Who would you let connect to you then if you realize that? And what would you do now to change it? If you notice, if you feel like you are sitting there feeling and you're feeling something in your chest, you're feeling something in your body, as you're listening to this, ask yourself one question. Leaving the space of feeling, what is that going to bring into my life versus what happens if I stay feeling everything? Do you want somebody to connect to how you feel, or do you want somebody to connect to what you think? Your mind will not want to answer that. And if it does, it's going to say, I'd like to think about what I feel first. There's no first in that. Thinking happens after feeling. Then you're not present if you're not feeling, right? So who are you expecting to show up if you're not? Thinking is the furthest place you can travel from feeling. And some of us have gone quite the distance away from what we feel, to not make sense of the feeling, but to make sense of the thoughts about the feeling. How's that not abandonment, rejection, and betrayal of self? When are you allowed to feel is not up to the mind. It's up to you, the one who feels everything. The you inside of you that feels everything. If you're not connected there, who do you want to connect to you? As you listen to this, focus on the feel, not your thoughts about it. This has been Conscious Connection Sunday. We love you all. Feel that. Anything to add?
If you're confused about if you're thinking or feeling, close your eyes. Give it a second. If it's coming from your head, you are thinking it. If it's coming from your essence, you're feeling it. That's where we start. Do you feel obsessive, or do you think obsessive? Do you feel despair, or do you think despair? Because when it comes to this connection, when it comes to separation, we think despair. We feel security.
I'm secure in the abandonment of self by being in my head.
Yeah. Thank you guys for listening.
To feel.
To feel.
Listening to feel. Not listening to react. Listening to think. If you don't connect to listening to how you feel, What are you doing? And who are you expecting to meet you there if you're not doing that? This is Lee and Sherry.
Signing off.
We love you guys. Happy Sunday.
All I hear is hey now, the children are awake. Come on, stop. Children, what's that sound? Something's in your way, go and burn it down. Stop. Children, what's that sound? Something's in your way, go and burn it down. Say, hey now, the children are awake now. Pipe down, it's more than they can say or take down. If they don't catch a break, they'll break down. All I hear is hey now, the children are awake now. Pipe down, it's more than they can say or take down. If they don't catch a break, they'll break down. All I hear is hey now, the children are awake.